So good afternoon, and first of all, thanks a lot for all of you of being here. We are going to speak in this panel, I believe, in one of the most important tools and one of the most important variables, as the economists used to say, that is health. And I start wishing to all of you Saúde, health. And health is really the most, we can have everything in life. If we do not have health, we do not have anything. And having said that, is very important, not only prevention, but is also very important to feel and understand our needs and the needs of the others. First of all, our needs, because in order to do a big map, we need first to understand us, and then to understand the others, as put our feet on the other floors. And to say that, I think it will be very important to, in this panel, that is so important to feel, not only to try to know, but to feel it. This is the big gap that we need nowadays, and it's because of that that I'm very happy to be here to speak about such an important variable as health. And there cannot be better sequence to this important discussion than after a panel on geopolitics. As we have seen from the COVID pandemic, healthcare pandemics prevention and response rely to a great extent on governments, how they are able to manage on one issue that actually is an issue of national security, reflecting reputation and underscoring the commitment to protect and support its people. Health, as we see, is about us, is about we, and government also have here such an important role. Having said that, I really would like to invite our distinguished panelists to come to here. And also, I want to say a word of thanks to the organization. It's very important to feel that Europe needs Africa and Africa needs Europe, and that we are together. We all can learn a lot. We have to feel this reality, and we cannot forget that our present and our future, especially the future of our generation, of our kids, of our friends, depends in the relationships we will be able to build today. If we are not able to build today these links, these relationships that will allow progress, it will be much more harder to get results. So for us, and when I say us, I'm speaking about all the Europeans, Africans, all the world citizens, and for they, the next generations, let's do the best we can and the best work with results. We are here to get results and to get a better world and a better lives for thousands of children and thousands of people that are suffering now. We are lucky, the ones that are lucky enough to be seated here. We have the obligation, and I'm going to repeat, we have the obligation to fight for a better world. So having said that, I really would like to ask the lovely, and I have to say that because Gavi really makes a huge work in the world. I want to really to ask, please, Marianne Zarakauau to come here to the stage and to speak. Marianne, she has been in charge. You can sit here, please. Up there. Yeah, you stay here. Well, she has been Gavi's Chief Resorts Mobilize and Grow for a long time. Please sit. And she has been on Gavi's board since 2011. I have the opportunity to speak more about the lovely work that you have been making and how we, all this tease you, how can you do it? But now I'm going also to ask another lady to come to the table, please, to round. That is Conceição Calhau. Conceição Calhau, she's a professor at Universidade Nova de Lisboa. Also works with health and nutrition and have a lot to teach us about how it's important to prevent, as all of us know. Moreover, I would like to ask Hans Martens to come here. Hans Martens is president of European Association for Value-Based Healthcare. And last but not least, Rui Meireles is the Director of Health, Life and Employee Benefits at MDS, Portugal, an insurance company. Please. So we are going to make this conversation, we are going to speak in English and also in Portuguese, because we have two members, but actually we live in a hybrid world, so now let's speak both, because the important thing here to communicate. So, but I'm going to start with Maria-Ange Serrahao, and my first question, actually I would like you to explain, because I think it's so important for the ones that don't have a deep knowledge about Gavi and what Gavi does. Can you just tell briefly, because of course numbers are numbers, and you work in 78 countries, and you give vaccines to more than 1 billion children. Can you explain me how you work in this field, how important it is to give a vaccine to a child?
Thank you, and thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here again this year. Gavi is really a public-private partnership. So I think it's really based on the principles that brings us here today at the Euro-African Forum of working together to bring the best acumen from the public and the private sector to deliver, of course, vaccines, which is one of the most cost-effective interventions. You heard it from the Minister of Angola and the Minister of Burkina Faso. And basically, the role of Gavi has really been to bring vaccine to the low and middle income country, the 73 countries that you talked about. And what's amazing here, and I think I'm reflecting on the conversation of this morning, where we have talked, of course, about the challenges. What's amazing here is to see actually how promising and the progress that we see happening in the area of vaccines and science. So in 20 years, we have been able to support countries immunize 1 billion children, more than 1 billion children. To give you a sense of the magnitude, is twice the population of the European Union, you know, so it's quite amazing and saving a lot of millions of lives together. But what's really important is, you know, this idea that we can come together, build a partnership, and bring the best. And this is really actually to all of you out there, it's really a business partnership. It's not about aid. Because what Gavi does is actually bring the demand of 73 countries and then being able to negotiate with vaccine manufacturers, with banks, with companies that help deliver vaccines like logistics, to, of course, create a market, bring guarantee to this market, and of course help develop the products that we need. So what we are, you know, now moving forward to do, you know, based on our success and what we have seen, and we have seen how important it was during the pandemic. You mentioned it. It's really has become a core in the health security. So what we have decided to do for the next 5 years is really, based on all of our learnings, accelerate. We heard a lot this morning. I think the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Portugal talked about unpredictability. What do you do when the world is unpredictable? You prepare better. You prepare better and faster, and that's what we are going to do. So in the next 5 years, what we committed to do is actually immunize the next 1 billion children in half the time, you know, in half the time. And we can do it thanks to partnership. And the first way we do this partnership, of course, we launched a month ago, you know, co-chaired by our board chair here, José Manuel Barroso, the president of France and the African Union, you know, the new strategy of Gavi that we unveiled there. And it really actually is a perfect illustration of the partnership between Europe and Africa, because the whole Team Europe was there, but also heads of state from the continent, the new president of Senegal. It was his first state visit in Europe, the president of Rwanda, Ghana, Botswana, many, you know, leaders and ministers of health, to, you know, basically showcase that we want to be together, as you said, because we need each other, for the next period. So what we committed is actually to immunize more than 500 million children in the next 5 years and 300 million in Africa.
Yeah, but to that, and I think we can all learn a lesson from what you just said. We are speaking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the first lesson to be learned is that we need partnership between geographical regions and between private and government. Yes? Yeah. You are doing that with both, with the private, with government, and then of course with NGOs and so on. Yeah. But this wedding, this is the key of success, in your opinion, of Gavi, is the partnership between different regions and the partnership between different players.
No, definitely, because as I said, you know, it's bringing the business acumen, the business expertise of each one of us. Gavi, we know the countries well. We, for example, have worked very well with Angola and a lot of other countries. So what's key for businesses here is to understand what's the demand, because vaccine is you know, an industry where you have a lot of capital investments, so you do need to make sure that actually there are people buying and that, you know, and the demand is there. So a big part of Gavi is knowing that demand. The vaccine manufacturer, they bring their science and technology. A very good example, and that, you know, we are very proud of, especially today. I'm sure all of you are familiar with malaria. It's actually one of the most debilitating diseases. Africa has the biggest burden. Close to 500,000 children die every year in Africa of malaria and people. And we have been able, you know, it's one of the most complicated viruses. And after 35 years, we now have a new vaccine that was developed with the science of Europe, the support of Gavi. It was tested for 3 years in a few countries, and this year we are introducing it in a lot of countries. The demand is huge. We heard the Minister of Angola saying that she hopes that we should be rolling out the vaccine very soon. This year already it has been rolled out in 15 countries. Yesterday it was rolled out in Côte d'Ivoire. So very important, and it couldn't have been possible without this partnership between vaccine manufacturing, Gavi, the health organization, of course, the companies that help bring these vaccines to the villages or to the countries is very important. Logistics, digital. We talked about digital. You know, how you can track what is happening. So that's really the power of the partnership. Another very important aspect, and I do want to emphasize this because it's quite unique. Professor Barroso talked about respectful partnership. And I think that we see that in Gavi because everybody contributes. Countries contribute. You know, when Gavi started, indeed, at the beginning, sovereign governments, a lot of the European governments were primarily paying for the cost of the vaccine. Today, it's 50-50. Countries contribute. So the African countries contribute. They have contributed more than 2 billion. They are going to contribute another 4 billion. So everybody is doing its part. And of course, we are buying the vaccine to the pharmaceutical company, to the logistics companies, because it's important that they are able also to contribute on the research and development.
You are involving.
Yes.
Everybody is part of the solution. Okay.
But equally, that's very important.
Yeah. Okay. So having said that and continuing the prevention side, now I'm going to pass to Professor Conceição Calhau. And if you don't mind, I'm going to change to Portuguese. So the Portuguese speaker will speak in Portuguese. And Professora Conceição Calhau, muito obrigada por estar aqui. A professora Calhau tem feito um trabalho estrondoso em termos de nutrição e todos sabemos que nutrir bem é o maior tool que podemos ter, a prevenção de todos os diseases possíveis. E eu pedia à professora que partilhasse um pouco, aliás, vou-lhe perguntar diretamente, que acho que todos estamos interessados aqui nesta audiência, até que ponto é que a nutrição é assim tão importante para evitar problemas não só no presente, no futuro, independentemente da geografia? Estamos todos aqui a falar de forma conjunta, independentemente da geografia, qual o papel da nutrição no nosso sistema imunitário? Isso estava uma grande palestra, mas assim, trying to be brief.
Em primeiro lugar, aqui de facto um gosto de estar neste palco, embora não é Eu sou académica e, portanto, não é propriamente um palco, embora esta seja a minha faculdade irmã, nós somos da mesma universidade, eu sou da Medical School, mas de facto não é propriamente um palco no qual eu esteja habituada a estar e, portanto, espero que o contributo seja o melhor. Na realidade, falando a seguir às vacinas e de acordo com o desafio aqui da moderadora, nós quando falamos em imunidade estamos a falar, obviamente, e cada vez nós temos ouvido mais falar, sobretudo com a pandemia, com a Covid-19, na importância das vacinas, mas a alimentação e a nutrição também mexe imenso na imunidade inespecífica. E, portanto, sem dúvida nenhuma, aliás, nós temos um mundo bastante diferente depois da Covid-19, principalmente também numa maior sensibilidade para o tema da prevenção e daquilo que é cada um de nós estarmos bem do ponto de vista da saúde. E isso foi aquilo que claramente ficou da Covid-19, porque toda a gente percebeu que para o mesmo agente infeccioso, se as pessoas tinham obesidade, se tinham hipertensão, se tinham diabetes, efetivamente o risco de ter quadros mais severos era bastante grande. E, portanto, acho que é a oportunidade, de facto, de refletirmos sobre aquilo que são os estilos de vida. Não é propriamente a panaceia de todos os males, mas, efetivamente, a alimentação é a nossa base e não só a questão, como dizia a Mafalda muito bem, nós precisamos, é o bem maior, é a saúde, e para termos saúde temos que saber cuidar dela. Do ponto de vista político, é uma das coisas que eu, enquanto professora numa escola médica, tentamos formar também os profissionais de saúde nessa lógica. Se nós ouvimos muito as pessoas se queixarem naquilo que é sustentabilidade, sistemas de saúde, que têm direito à saúde, cada vez é mais importante cada um de nós também ter a consciência que é importante também temos o dever de cuidar dela e para isso precisamos de ter as ferramentas que precisamos. Portanto, sem dúvida nenhuma que a alimentação, e nós ouvimos muito falar daquilo que são os hábitos alimentares inadequados que condicionam a saúde, e a verdade é que quando olhamos para o continente África, e ainda ontem foi ver os números, claro que nós muitas vezes com muito preconceito temos sempre a ideia do HIV, daquilo que é a desnutrição, daquilo que são as diarreias, daquilo que é a malária, mas efetivamente a obesidade é um problema com franca expansão. Ou seja, neste momento nós temos 1 em cada 10 crianças já com problemas de excesso de peso e de obesidade.
Isto no continente africano,
exatamente, 1 em cada 5 adultos já com este problema. E claramente aqui há uma globalização e há uma alteração do paradigma. Portanto, temos que falar disto de uma forma sem preconceitos. A questão de podermos ajudar a África e da África nos poder ajudar a nós, até acho que é mais esse sentido que espero que se possa ter o sucesso naquilo que é o que nós podemos ter de bom, daquilo que podemos investir nestes países que têm muitíssimo por explorar.
Professor, mais tarde já vamos falar, enfim, da relação também que a professora tem trabalhado muito com universidades e com centros em África, mas agora passaria a palavra, vou saltar primeiro para o Dr. Rui Meireles, que também na parte de prevenção, e também continuarei a falar em português, na parte de prevenção, portanto, o doutor está à frente de uma empresa de seguros, até que ponto é que conseguem fazer o pave the way nas regiões em que estão em África, com a vertente da saúde? O que é que está a acontecer quando um novo player, como a vossa entidade, chega ao continente africano para trabalhar? Qual é que é a realidade com que se defrontam?
Muito bem. Só dizer que tipicamente, eu venho do meio dos seguros, não é? Do ambiente dos seguros. Tipicamente, os seguros atuam após o acontecimento do evento, não é? Após o sinistro. Quando falamos especificamente da atividade seguradora no seguro de saúde, de facto, a indústria tem vindo a mudar o pensamento e tem atuado cada vez mais na prevenção, que é também um desafio dentro da própria indústria. Depois, a questão que me coloca, como é que essa atuação na prevenção se nota, tem muito a ver também com a maturidade dos mercados, não é? Se a maturidade de um mercado como o nosso aqui na Europa, ou comparado com os Estados Unidos, ou com a realidade de alguns países da África, é substancialmente diferente. Portanto, há um nível de maturidade da própria indústria enquanto seguro de saúde é substancialmente diferente. Isto, portanto, quer dizer que em Portugal, naquilo que é o continente europeu, vamos tendo, no âmbito daquilo que é as coberturas do risco de saúde, vamos tendo algumas asseguradoras a investir cada vez mais em prevenção, em fazer check-ups, em premiar, em desenvolver aquelas apps tecnológicas para dar prémios às pessoas se elas andarem não sei quantos passos por dia, and so on. Portanto, a indústria tem vindo também a acompanhar este processo de prevenção na saúde, como, obviamente, como forma de mitigação depois do custo que virá a ter mais tarde na ocorrência do sinistro, digamos. Não é propriamente há aqui obviamente um objetivo misto, não é? Portanto, de fazer uma gestão eficiente também daquilo que é a gestão económica do custo com o seguro de saúde.
Deixe-me aproveitar o que acabou de dizer sobre a parte mais digital e fazer-lhe aqui uma questão exatamente sobre todos estes issues que se vão levantando em termos de sistemas de saúde. Como é que está a funcionar o conceito do e-saúde? Já funcionam em África com este sistema de e-saúde? É um conceito que ainda está embrionário ou já é uma realidade? Porque, por exemplo, na banca, todos sabemos, e também já foi referido aqui, que é uma realidade. Mas em termos de saúde, como é que funciona?
Não, foi curioso, as duas intervenções anteriores foi exatamente muito curioso, porque aquilo que para nós é uma realidade hoje, eu diria, no espaço de Portugal e europeu, e falando no conceito do e-saúde, nós hoje temos como adquirido as prescrições eletrónicas, as teleconsultas, um conjunto de serviços que nós temos, seja através do Serviço Nacional de Saúde, seja através do Serviço Privado de Saúde, que são dados adquiridos. E, de facto, lá está, isto leva para aquela maturidade que eu dizia, aquilo que não sendo propriamente um especialista, mas o conhecimento que eu tenho do mercado de Angola e Moçambique, se calhar ainda falta desenvolver um bocadinho essa maturidade, mas volto a dizer, foi muito curioso ouvirmos exatamente nas intervenções, quer da Sra. Ministra de Angola, quer do Sr. Ministro do Burkina Faso, exatamente esse cuidado, essa atenção, nomeadamente em relação à telemedicina, porque desde logo pode prestar algum tipo de cuidados primários, mas também tem outra função que eu acho muito relevante e muito interessante, que é a função de gatekeeper, não é? Que é a função de fazer uma triagem à partida, seja em que ambiente for, de perceber se a pessoa tem mesmo que se deslocar a uma unidade de cuidados de saúde para uma situação de emergência ou não, ou se pode ser aconselhado à distância, tratado, eventualmente, medicado e aguardar 1 hora ou 2, perceber qual é a evolução do seu estado de saúde e depois então se melhorar, naturalmente não terá que se deslocar, e isto tanto é válido para o sistema público como para os sistemas privados.
Muito bem. Vou agora passar então ao Mr. Hans Martens, and I will ask you the question in English, of course. And my question is, can you share a little bit, because you have a deep knowledge in European health systems, what is going on, and tell me what happened, or what were the big challenge after COVID, after the pandemic, what happened, and in this new system that has been raised, what are the factors that you think have more impact, even not only in Europe, but also in the relationship with Africa?
Well, yes, because I'd like to mention what you're saying, but also like to say how this can bring new perspectives into the partnership, if you allow me.
Yes.
Let me also just say that a lot of people speak Portuguese. I'm Danish of birth, so could I just change to Danish, or? No, that was a joke, okay. But I can do Flemish and French as well, because I work quite a lot of time in Brussels, and I live in Spain, so we can speak Andalou as well, if you want. But anyway, I'll stick to English. But I was, for many years, I was a leader of a think tank in Brussels, and that was a really good time because we had the most excellent chairman of the European Commission at the time. His name was Barroso, yeah. That was really great. So we had many good exchanges at that time. But I'm saying this because my angle on this is very much sort of the political, administrative, organizational kind of thing, just to warn you, right? I'm now chairman of the European Association for Value-Based Healthcare and strategic advisor on various health questions. So the retirement for me has been postponed a little bit. But what I'd like to talk to you about here, and where the change, in my opinion, has been, comes from my interest in the focus on value, both for patients, which is a lot of things that people work on, but also for society. So I would like to look at the health spending not just as a cost. And we have a lot of people, including some insurance, who always talk about the cost. This is too expensive, we can't do that, and so on. I'm saying, let's look at it as an investment and ask what kind of payback, what kind of value will it create for society, but also for the patient. And that has led me to a strong focus on prevention. But also prevention of disease progression, so early detection, and then preventing diabetes to develop and so on, cancer and so on. But that requires, of course, a lot of access, easy access for people, right? But also for all people, so we need to put in the picture here, equity. Ability to do diagnosis and screening and stuff like that. And then, of course, vaccines, because there is nothing that gives more value in an investment than vaccines does, right? So this is a very good example on how you can use this concept. But you asked about Europe. What we saw during the COVID was something that was underway, which was accentuated, and that is the resilience of the health systems in Europe are on risk. We have far too young people to work and to pay the taxes, so thank you for those who are doing it. But we have a lot of elderly people who are getting support from the public sector, but also have a lot of morbidities. And they're on retirement and so on and so forth, and there's a lot of other cost factors. But we've had focus on sick care, which is basically repairing diseases, but too little on prevention, I think, in Europe. So one of the things we need to do is move in that direction to do early diagnosis and all the kind of things I talked about. And Europe actually have very good standing on technology and availability of life science products, medtech and pharma and so on. And if we look at Africa, we have the completely opposite demography. We actually have many young people who might not even be able to find a job ever. So that's something we need to deal with. But it's the opposite kind of thing. And Africa is also weaker, obviously, on organization of health, including prevention and diagnosis and the things we just talked about, and also access of life science products, including vaccines in many cases. And you're doing a great job but there's still a lot of work to be doing there. So I can see a basis for partnership here because of the opposite situations and the different focus we have. Let me just add from what we heard this morning, I think there was a concept that wasn't mentioned, but it's called European strategic sovereignty, and it's going to be discussed a lot in the coming years. It is basically Europe is getting nervous of of our neighbors. Well, other parts of the world, let me put it this way. Russia, certainly. China. There's a lot of discussion, and I don't know what's going to happen in the US this autumn, but, can we depend, and so on. So we need to be sovereign in all kinds of things, also in health and life science and so on. But Africa is a more acceptable partner. And it's a partner that we actually owe quite a lot of partnership, and they're close to us, as we heard also this morning. And I think the increasing worry of Chinese influence actually pushes more in that direction. And let me just say one thing about the workforce, because we were supposed to do that as well. A lot of young people there that we could easily pay more to get to our countries, train, and let them work in the health sector, because we need them there. I find this completely unethical and a bad way to go, because we cannot, in particular, let some of the, let's say, poorer countries in Africa pay for education of staff that they need themselves and then just take them. And I'm saying this because I see examples of going in that direction. And there are some countries, and I'm not blaming anybody in particular, but it's something that Portugal can do. It is something that France can do. It is something that Spain can do because of the language issues and so on. It's not something that Denmark can do, and Sweden can do, and Germany can do, because not a lot of people speak that way. But on the other hand, I also said there's a lot of people there, young people who will never get a job. And that's why I think we need to find a partnership on how to deal with this. How can we actually benefit from both sides on this situation, the demographic situation, without being unethical?
A win-to-win solution.
Sorry?
A win-to-win solution.
I would like to discuss that because I do not have the answer to exactly how to do it. I think it's a very, very tricky question. But I have seen ministers from European countries going on hunt for trained nurses and so on in other parts of the world. And I'm not sure I really like what that is all about. But can I also just mention one more thing, because I know you want to stop
yes,
me.
Of course.
But I just want
have to go through Africa.
There's something we're not good at in Europe, in health. I've been fighting my life, to make Europeans look across the borders and look what the best practices we have in Europe. But we live in silos here to a very large extent, not so much in the clinical area, but in the organizational area, as I'm saying. If you want to reform your primary healthcare system, why don't you look to the ones that have the longest life expectancy and have a lot of success and so on? No, we can do better. I would urge us to, when we talk about developing to Africa, identify the best practices we have and try to emulate them and use them as an example instead of reinventing the wheel and every time we do something new. So that is another thing I would like to mention. If you want me to come back, I could do that. But I have an example of something that has happened just after COVID, because the EU has suddenly got health on the agenda when we talk about Africa. There's been a partnership, but health is now just being included as well. And we have a number of projects going on at the moment, and it's just been decided very recently. There's something called Team Europe, which is Europe and the African Union, plus Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, and Spain. And they come up with projects now for about 500 million euros until 2027.
Okay.
So quite a lot of money. And this is on prevention, in particular infectious threats, antimicrobial resistance, AMR, and so on. There's money for public health institutes. There's money for digitalization. There's also for developing social protection and so on. So it's beginning to come. But what I want to say at the end is it is not just about grants. It's great that they're there, but it can't be that way. It has to work as a partnership, not just aid. As I said, Europe has a lot to offer on life sciences and best practice and so on and so forth. Africa can be a great client here. And I think the cost from Europe should be seen as an investment, not a gift. A healthy Africa is good for Europe. A more prosperous Africa is good for Europe. And I think this is what the theme of this conference is all about. How do we partner for growth?
Thank you so much, and for this message that we are not just speaking about aid, we are speaking about partnerships and of progress.
And in partnerships, there's also public-private, as you were saying. We should not be blind for that. I mean, we should work together with industries, for example, on screening centers, vaccination centers, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that, in this panel and in all the panels we have been having, I think that this is something that is already in all of our minds, is that we need to work together. We need to give our hands. Otherwise, the progresses will be much difficult for sure. But having said that, of course, there are some obstacles, and of course, it's not easy. And we have to be honest, there is a lot of bureaucracy. The first step to do is to recognize what is going on. And we have to recognize that the bureaucracy, in somehow, for the ones that want to invest, where are the incentives? For the ones, so having, please, go.
No, I just want to say what you're saying is, of course, correct. But if you also rely on the private sector, they will say stop at a certain point, because they would also like to see it as investment and want return on investment. So the task for us is maybe to go into that kind of thing, and the task for Africa is basically to make the investment climate prosperous. And you know what I mean by that, because I mean cutting bureaucracy, and I mean cutting corruption and all those kind of things, because that's the only way to develop.
Thank you so
you
much
can't just
for your
pour
opinion.
public money into it and just say, well, we close our eyes for this because the Chinese do.
Yeah, but I think we are already, at least in a level of the first derivative of the equation. I think all of us understand that we have to work together and not just give out. And speaking, now let's go into an example. And if you can, please share with us, with Marie-Ange, if you can share with us your last announcement that you are going to start producing vaccines in Africa. And of course, I'm sure you are going to ask all the audience if in somehow we know how to contribute, because we are not just here to speak, we are here to achieve results. And for that, I'm going to pass now to Marie-Ange to share this good news.
Thank you so much. And I think your point on public-private partnership and a balanced partnership, I think, is exactly this. I mean, we launched a month ago a new instrument, and I think Professor Barroso talked about it earlier today and yesterday, the African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator, which is really a financing instrument to encourage African production of vaccines on the continent. And why is that? Africa's population is actually 20% of the world population, yet the continent only produces 0.1% of its vaccine. And what the pandemic showed, of course, is that when you have a major crisis and of course limited products like COVID-19 at the time. You know, the countries that are producing are ultimately the one keeping the vaccine and the insurance, I mean, what goes into the production of the vaccine. And so Africa was really left behind. And talking about vaccine sovereignty, it's really about that effort, you know, in a sense, bringing some of the resilience. You know, having a global vaccine market is quite important. As I mentioned earlier, vaccines are extremely expensive to produce. You need expertise, you know, particular science, and very few have it. But at the same time, you need also to have economies of scale so that it's affordable. So what this instrument does is really, from our knowledge, Gavi, again, in the partnership of what countries need in the continent. You know, we know, for example, that Nigeria has 8 million babies, you know, born every year, that we need to produce vaccine from them. But also the continent has specific needs of vaccine. Malaria, cholera, there are big cholera outbreaks right now, yellow fever, Ebola. Do you know where the Ebola vaccine is being produced right now? Can everybody tell me in the room?
Does anybody know?
The one that don't say it will have to give us 1 million each, José Manuel, I think, right? Dollar, I mean. Huh? Well, the vaccine is produced in Eastern Germany, and it's a vaccine that is just for Africa. So it's actually tackling this type of
goes along with what Mr. Hans was
inefficiencies.
saying.
And so what the instrument does is actually giving financial incentive to encourage local production, regional production, I should say. We know that, you know, typically when you start vaccine production, roughly for 10 years, you know, you are not breaking even. And even so in Africa, because, you know, you have labor that is 40% higher and operating costs and, you know, energy costs and so on. So the idea is really for a vaccine manufacturer that will reach the pre-qualification. So pre-qualification means that they are able to have a prototype that meets the requirement of the World Health Organization, because it's about vaccine, it's about health. You know, we give them a payment and visibility over 10 years to have that payment to be able to produce. Of course, there are vaccines that we are encouraging. I mentioned them earlier, like malaria, because there's a lot of need, cholera, you know, and others. And it's really a global effort, a global partnership, because this instrument was developed not just with the African vaccine manufacturing, but also the global manufacturers. Yeah. Is very important. You don't want to end up with a vaccine costing much more in one region than the other. Yeah, but and it's about, you know, spreading the cost.
It was also a consequence of the lessons learned after COVID. Yeah, you learn that you need at least to have someone in your fridge. Using a metaphor.
No, it means that you need to be able to rely on part of your production, but also for things that are actually ultimately are needed and you cannot find elsewhere, but you still need to also trade and have other products and other vaccine. Because what's important is, of course, the research and development that needs to be financed. That's why actually you do need to get a return on investment, you know. It's important, and for us, it's, you know, we pay vaccine manufacturers with the profit needed. The fact is that we play on the volume, you know, and so they will have a lower price for Gavi countries than for other countries, because it's really about the big volume.
And tell me one thing, when you are in your work trying to raise funds to invest, do you think there is a lot of sensibility when we speak about vaccines? There is also these human skills or just the financial outcome? Because it's important to see if you can achieve your objectives of 2030, no?
No, very,
and what are your objectives?
I think the thing that indeed there's a lot of negotiation, compromise, that is quite important to reach a middle ground, and that was quite important, for example, in developing that instrument, acknowledging, for example, that, you know, developing vaccine manufacturing in Africa will take 10 years. And I know typically in politics you have a much shorter time frame. So people want the return on investment now. It's agreeing that it will take longer, so you have to negotiate. But it's actually what works well in this negotiation is seeing the results. You know, we announced the launch of this investment. We already have 1.2 billion, a big part coming from Europe, but also from private companies. And what was interesting is, and the minister was there, so she can testify, that we already have some clear partnership. You know, we had announcement of partnership from European companies with another African manufacturing, from the Korean company with another one. So I think seeing that it happens makes the difference, because you build your credibility as it goes. So
it's an incentive.
You have to be.
To see results,
you have to dream, but still have to be reasonable. And each time show that it happens, and that build further the confidence, no?
Thank you so much.
Yes.
E agora vou passar à professora Calhau, a quem vou perguntar, professora Conceição Calhau, da sua experiência e também da sua experiência de interação, porque também colabora, porque também é muito importante falarmos aqui do workforce, que é um dos subjects deste painel. A sua experiência de colaboração com a África, como é que tem sido?
Bom, nós naquilo que é a área da nutrição temos tido projetos internacionais com países como países do Sul da América do Sul, e com a África naquilo que é matéria-prima para explorar. E em concreto com a Universidade Pedagógica de Maputo temos um projeto relativamente a subprodutos do caju, porque na realidade há muito subproduto e há muito produto da produção primária, quer animal, quer vegetal, que tem potencial para explorar, que nós, do ponto de vista da investigação, também temos muito interesse, porque na área da alimentação nós temos aqui dois problemas importantes. Um, por um lado, é a questão dos hábitos alimentares inadequados, as pessoas se alimentarem mal e se calhar também não ligarem muito àquilo que são, no fundo, as correrias do dia-a-dia e a ocidentalização da alimentação, mas, por outro lado, nós precisamos de novas respostas para desafios da escassez alimentar, de termos que alimentar uma população com um número crescente e, portanto, temos que saber aproveitar os recursos todos. E, portanto, do ponto de vista da investigação, há aqui uma colaboração extremamente interessante. Por outro lado, e agora pegando um bocadinho naquilo que eu estava a dizer da Covid-19, e que temos falado da Covid-19, que também já lá vão 4 anos, e o que é que nós aprendemos e quais são as lições, mas há um tema que é particularmente interessante para o continente africano e para os países do sul da Europa, como Portugal, que é o caso da vitamina D, e que sei que é um tema que volta e meia na comunicação social se vai ouvindo falar, mas sempre com alguma descredibilização aqui no nosso país, mas de facto a África, para termos aqui uma ideia do quanto temos sol, dizemos que os países do sul da Europa e Portugal é um país de sol, mas a África também é uma região com muito sol, com muita incidência solar, mas a verdade é que temos muita deficiência de vitamina D. A vitamina D só é uma hormona e que também já agora tem imenso papel na imunidade, e porque a Covid-19 que eu introduzi ainda agora é que na realidade quando veio a pandemia, quando chegou em 2020 à Europa, aquilo que eu, enquanto investigadora, coloquei de hipótese foi que a deficiência de vitamina D nos tornasse mais vulneráveis, e também a flora intestinal. Foram 2 projetos de investigação que coordenei. Na flora intestinal até fomos o primeiro grupo internacional a registar o ensaio clínico, ou seja, se nós temos uma alimentação inadequada, os micro-organismos do intestino são diferentes e temos menos capacidade também de dar resposta ao novo agente infeccioso, mas também, por outro lado, a deficiência de vitamina D é outra das condições que nos torna mais vulneráveis. E é curioso que o nosso estudo publicado, portanto, numa revista internacional, mostrou claramente que nós temos genes muito África, portanto temos características genéticas que nos tornam menos capazes de fazer síntese de vitamina D mesmo apanhando sol. E portanto isto é um preconceito importante de desmistificar no fundo, porque continuamos a ter este problema, e é um problema de saúde pública até, neste caso, aqui com uma grande...
Ou seja, há uma grande hipótese de sinergia de informação e de cruzamento de informação entre o continente africano e o continente europeu.
A prevalência de um polimorfismo ao nível de uma enzima que tem um nome interessantíssimo para Portugal, que nos diz muito de futebol, que é o DHCR7. Este polimorfismo, que é muito prevalente na população portuguesa, estamos a falar em 19%, por comparação aos países do norte da Europa, de 2% a 3%, e mesmo Espanha com menos percentagem, mas muito prevalente em África. Portanto, é uma característica genética que, significa que mesmo apanhando sol, temos dificuldade de fazer síntese de vitamina D, aquela que sabemos que há uma síntese através da síntese cutânea. Portanto, isto é também um mito, e daí termos
Ou
tanta
seja,
deficiência
e mais
de vitamina D.
informação a ser partilhada entre ambos os continentes, porque até isso
Sim,
temos
sim.
em comum. Até
Exatamente.
Isso temos em comum. E eu vou só passar, vou passar num instantinho também ali ao Rui Meireles também, a quem lhe vou perguntar que relação é que coloca entre o público e o privado em termos de sistemas de saúde. E se tem sido fácil para vós, como uma empresa privada, entrar no mercado africano? Tem sido fácil, não tem? O que é que nos pode dizer sobre isto?
Muito bem. Os sistemas de saúde público e privado complementam-se, têm naturalmente uma complementariedade. Tem sido natural, diria, essa complementariedade. Há áreas, por exemplo, temos falado aqui muito na questão das vacinas, onde naturalmente o setor público está de longe detalhado para dar resposta às vacinas. Não é exclusivamente nessa área, mas é claramente uma área onde estará mais detalhado para dar resposta a essa necessidade. Por outro lado, por exemplo, em termos de desenvolvimento de novas tecnologias ou de novos medicamentos, o setor privado pode ter se calhar uma prevalência maior, ou pode ter um caminho mais fácil de conduzir. Já percebi que estamos fora de tempo. Só para dizer, em relação àquilo que tem sido a nossa experiência, particularmente nos países de Angola e Moçambique, o desenvolvimento dos sistemas de saúde, seja privado, seja público, tem feito o seu caminho. Portanto, era aquilo que eu dizia há pouco, é uma questão de maturidade. O privado vai um bocadinho atrás daquilo que tem sido também o desenvolvimento do setor público e, portanto, o setor privado com as multinacionais que estão presentes a trabalhar no país, com as empresas prestadoras de serviço, algumas locais, outras nacionais, com as seguradoras, algumas locais, outras multinacionais, e tem desenvolvido também o setor privado, eu diria muito à imagem do que se passa aqui em Portugal.
Muito bem. Hans Martens, I know that you want to say something, you were making the sign, but...
Just bullet points, right?
Yes,
So the first
because
one,
we are running out of time.
No, when I talked about value, for companies is one thing, what you get back on the investment, that's money, right? When I said look at health generally as an investment, I talked about value in a little bit broader concept. 1, 2, Europe also needs medicines. We are beginning to be scared of vaccines, lack of vaccines, so we need trusted partners, another argument. We are developing a concept called One Health. I just want to introduce it as well because it combines nature, animal, and people health. It's important as well to have that in mind. Many of the health threats we're talking about are global. And then I really would like somebody to take the point that we had for today about the workforce seriously, to discuss it in some circles before we begin to do unethical things about stealing people and overpaying them just to get to repair our demographic problems in Europe. So if somebody wants to take it up somewhere, I would like to contribute.
I don't know if if 3 minutes it's done, or I don't know if someone wants to ask a question. Since the subject is health, I'm going to ask permission to the organization does anybody has any question in audience? No? I think with all the advice of there is a question here? Sorry.
Mas, Mafalda, enquanto esperamos pelas perguntas, só aqui duas notas, finais, citando o professor Sobrinho Simões, patologista muito conhecido, que é, nós temos as doenças que os políticos quiserem, acho que faz sentido aqui também, e por outro lado o desafio dos novos medicamentos para o tratamento da obesidade, que sabemos que não estamos a ser capazes, a Europa e os Estados Unidos, de produzir. Poderia ser aqui o nosso continente africano.
Eu acho que deste painel sairmos daqui não só com o facto de estarmos a começar a produzir vacinas em África, e eu gosto de falar de nós, gosto de falar no plural, não só com isso, como também do facto que a professora Conceição Calhau acabou de falar, de que a Europa e o mundo não está com capacidade de produção de medicamentos e também das ditas canetas que conseguem combater a obesidade, e que isto poderá ser uma oportunidade no continente africano. Acho que estas duas ideias São até ideias de negócio bastante pertinentes para todos os que estamos aqui presentes, para os que nos acompanham lá em casa e que poderão acompanhar depois. São duas ideias muito pertinentes e, uma vez mais, é necessária colaboração, é necessária informação, em primeiro lugar, partilha e, concluindo, investimento conjunto. Eu não sei, vou então passar rapidamente.
Sim, boa tarde.
Se puder só identificar, se quiser, só não tem problema.
Sim, Ivandro Pitagros. Eu sou angolano, mas vivo aqui em Portugal há bastante tempo. E queria perguntar, este ano tivemos a informação de que a República de Cabo Verde conseguiu erradicar a malária. Ora, eu como angolano também gostaria de poder algum dia ver esse feito acontecer no meu país. E não sei se algum dos senhores consiga dizer que tipo de best practice é que podiam ser exportadas para países como Angola e não só, para se conseguir a erradicação da malária.
I don't know who wants to answer that. The vaccine. Actually, no seguimento da sua questão, vou só sendo muito breve, saiu ontem, que eu acho também importante sabermos, o último relatório da Organização Mundial de Saúde e que, infelizmente, apesar de todos os progressos que estão a ser feitos, ainda não estamos no patamar da vacinação antes ou pré-pandemia. Antes da pandemia, desculpem. E, portanto, isto para dizer o quê? Que há com certeza muito para ser feito, há muito que está a ser desenvolvido, já se consegue chegar a muita... A vacinação está a evoluir, isso é um facto, os números falam por eles, mas ainda há muita coisa para fazer. Mas respondendo, não poderia deixar de estar aqui num painel de saúde sem falar do último relatório da OMS e da Unicef, aliás, de ambos, de ontem, que acho que é importante termos todos em mente que ainda estão muitas crianças fora, 2,7 milhões de crianças, para ser precisa, fora do processo de vacinação atualmente. Mas, faz favor. You'll answer in English.
In English.
But I'm very happy to know that you can understand everything in Portuguese.
So I think for all the information, of course, more up-to-date information, we have it on the WHO or Gavi website. I think it's true that, for malaria, what is being recommended is, of course, the vaccine together with the other interventions, because as I said earlier, it's quite a disease that is evolving. The reality is, and that's why I mentioned it, and I mentioned the efforts on the vaccine production. It's a new vaccine, so there is more demand than supply. So right now the focus is on the children, right? Because they are the most vulnerable. We already have 2 manufacturers, but that's why there's this call and these efforts to have more production. And indeed, to the financiers in the room, they are actually, Gavi does is part of guaranteeing, the demand, but there are, great investment to be made in some of these companies. So this definitely a booming sector there. I want to come back on the release of the immunization report that you were mentioning. Of course, what we see that is great, the report was released at the beginning of the week. For those of you who are maybe new to this, every year there's a report on the immunization rate around the world. And first, what's important to acknowledge is that we went back to pre-pandemic levels. So I think thanks to all the efforts, the immunization rates have gone back to pre-pandemic levels. But particularly in Africa, actually, quite a lot of African countries have really increased. And I'm really pleased to commend Angola here, because the coverage in Angola has increased by 12% in a year. So I think it's very important. And so big congratulations to the minister also of Burkina Faso. The coverage also has increased a lot. I think it's quite important, and some panelists mentioned it before in the previous session. When we talk about Africa, there's a lot of diversity between countries.
Yes,
so we have to be very careful.
Yeah, this is a very
because
important.
Actually the world coverage have increased thanks to the African coverage. That has increased a lot. The minister we saw earlier, the coverage in Burkina is 94%. and in Europe it's below 80%. Okay, so I think we have to be very careful because some countries are doing great, but of course we want the majority to go, because the more we are prepared, the better we are prepared for the next pandemic and also for climate change. You know, a lot of the viruses that used to be just in warm weathers, now you see more and more in the north, malaria, dengue, and we need more production of vaccine also because of this. But we have to be very careful.
I'm very grateful that you said that.
The averages mask a lot of differences. And actually, you have, I think, that are doing very well. And actually, this year's coverage have been lifted for the most part by African countries moving along.
Yeah,
so
I
think it is quite important. The last point I would say is that, you know, the mutual partnership also has to acknowledge some of the social media aspect, right? We didn't talk about it, and I'll say it, you know. Typically, actually, in Africa, there's a great acceptance of immunization because prevention is all you have. You know, a vaccine costs, you know, a few cents. If you were to have your child immunized, on average, is $200 per person. For countries that have $200 per capita revenues, it's just unbearable. And you have no doctors. The problem with social media, of course, is that, you know, a lot of the hesitancy that you see in Europe, and it's a big responsibility also, I work with the European Council about this, you know, now moves to Africa, and then people start asking questions. The problem is that you don't have the doctors there, you know. So I think there's also a lot to be done with digital internet companies that we are partnering with to make sure you have the right information the right information available, so that people also continue getting confidence on the product, because that's actually the biggest issue. May not be the production of the access to the product, but the fact that people, you know, with all these hesitancies, start thinking, okay, I don't need this, or this is dangerous, or this has all kind of adverse effect. And that's one of the big legacy of COVID that we have to tackle.
And thank you so much, just to finish, thank you so much for giving this insight, because it's very important actually what Marianne just said, because we are speaking about two continents, Europe, Africa, and there are the countries that are part of Africa and are part of Europe are completely different. Sometimes we speak about completely different realities. Things just also happen in big countries like Brazil, for instance, but especially in Africa, that we have such different realities. When we made the average, and when sometimes, and I know I'm a journalist, so I can say that, when sometimes we see and we read the news, it's important to know that sometimes there are realities that is not the average, that they contribute to the average. But having said that, it's also important to give what you just said, a word of compliment, because this creates incentives. It's not just a way to say thanks, it's also a way of paving the way with incentive for a better and better work and provide work. So thank you so much for that, because I think this is key in explaining all these things.